All right, well, thanks for kicking us off. I am just going to talk briefly about the Conservation Standards Promotions team. You can see our marketing promotion of the conservation standards. It seems like maybe there's still a few questions, so hopefully Caroline or Sarah can help people with questions in the chat. If you have specific questions about the CS promotion team, though, thanks, Sarah, for adding the question slide into the chat. I'll also leave us a few minutes at the end. All right, so our team is basically to communicate with the broader audience and frame adaptive management. Here is the team. We try and meet every month or so, and it's a super fun group. We actually have someone new joining us in January, so we'll be excited to continue to share updates. All right. We are, again, going to focus on outreach about the conservation standards. You can see it kind of at the start there, that big strategy. And then if you flip to the next slide, you can see promoting CMP's role and achievement. So a lot of what we do, right, is that promotion and trying to speak to more people and get either more people involved or informed of what we're doing. So a few updates on the progress and products. Hopefully all or many of you have seen the conservation standards testimonial videos. They've been coming out throughout the year. We are also happy to put it in the chat if you're in the slides. This is hyperlinked, but it was a series that came out through YouTube. It's also linked on the website, and there are 11 different videos highlighting different organizations and how they're using the conservation standards. There's some great stories, and some of our speakers are in the call today. So thank you everyone who participated. We are continuing to work on more videos. We've had quite a handful of inquiries from other organizations who would like to highlight them, as well as a 1-minute anthem video, which is just kind of a really cool visual promotional video about the conservation standards, which is in English and Portuguese, and maybe in the future, some more languages. Also, we just wrapped up the video viewing contest, which was great. It was about a month long, and it doubled our YouTube views for these testimonial videos over that month. So kudos to International Crane Foundation and WWF and TNC Mongolia programs who had the most views, and both chose to participate in CS trainings for their prize. So that's great. The PowerPoints are updated. I think most people have seen that by now. One quick note is there was a funder who provided funding for a French translation. So it's great that we already have that in 2 languages. All right, what's next? As I mentioned, we're continuing with creating more testimonial videos. If your organization is interested, please reach out to myself or Sarah or Caroline. We can get you in touch. Most of those organizations are funding it, but it's a pretty nominal amount. We're also working on steps 1 through 5 videos, thanks to Justin and others who are reaching out to those organizations. They're in the works right now. We're doing an about CS promotional video, so a little bit longer than that 1 minute, and hopefully that's wrapping up soon. But our big new highlight is that we're hoping to get contributions that are photo stories. So we'll come out with more information in the next few months about photo stories, but those will highlight the conservation standards with a much more of a visual element. Check out the websites. I'm sure you guys have seen them redesigned. Again, check out the testimonial videos. And if you have questions, concerns, or want to join the working group itself, you can feel free to reach out to myself or Sarah, or again, anyone on that first slide. I do want to open it up for questions, or if Caroline or Sarah Weber or anyone else from the team has anything to add.
Nothing from me. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Any questions out there on what the team is doing?
You guys have been doing crazy ass, darn good stuff. Well done.
Great.
It's a fun group.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jacqueline. That was a great presentation and does represent a whole lot of really hard work, but a lot of fun as well. That's really been coming through in the work that you've been doing. So thank you so much for that. Just one last call for questions.
Can you please remove my video because I look so old? Jesus Christ, I look like some screaming geezer. Just take me off, please. Take me off.
A great video if you haven't seen it. Everyone watch the video. All right. Any last call? Otherwise, I'll keep us on schedule.
Lovely.
Great job
Thanks,
keeping.
Jacqueline, so much.
Yep.
So next up we have Marcia and Basha.
Hi everyone, I'm Basha, and today I'll be walking us through all the great work that the Climate Change Working Group did through this Climate Smart Conservation Initiative. And so while the slide loads, okay, it's here now. You may remember that not so long ago, we released 2 guides, one on ecosystem-based adaptation and the other one on climate smart conservation practice. So kind of building on that, we wanted to create a network and set up some sessions where everyone who's kind of grappling with this question of how to incorporate climate change into conservation planning, come together, share their experiences, ask questions, and learn from each other. And so that's exactly what we did. So on the next slide, you'll see our climate change working group. That's all of us pretty people right there. And then moving on, how do we fit into the CMP plan? So as you can see here, where the orange arrow points, we develop new guidance and tools. And then if you hit next, we also try to share good examples. And then another way that we relate is through what we did in this initiative, which is facilitate information flow and learning. Moving on to what we did. So if you hit next, you'll see the first thing we did was conduct 2 learning sessions on 2 specific topics. So one was climate smart situation models and how to use climate threats. And then the other one was scenario planning. And so what we did was we set up these sessions across different time zones so that around 40 different participants could participate from a variety of organizations. We had a couple of folks actually share examples of how they used climate smart situation models or scenario planning in their work, like folks from Bush Heritage, DNC Texas, as well as WCS Chile. And then finally, we also had, we developed 4 case studies. And so if you hit next a couple of times, all 4 of them will show up. And so we had one from the Tettle National Wildlife Refuge, one from WCS Chile, the Bush Heritage, and the 4th one is in works. And if you hit next one more time, you'll just see a screen grab from our CMP workspace, where all of these great discussions is linked, as well as the presentations and more. So that is basically what we did. What we're hoping to do next is to continue providing the space where discussion and learning can happen while we go more deeper into some of the other important areas when we think about incorporating climate change into planning, and then make sure that more specific guidance can also be developed, maybe more simplified guidance, as we got a lot of great recommendations on what the community thinks this group needs to be doing. And then in terms of how you can get involved, you can either participate or continue participating in this learning network. And the second more important point is that if you are applying these concepts in your work, please do reach out to us, me, Marcia, or John, and we'd be happy to talk to you and see if we can get any case studies developed or see how we can engage you. So that is it. Our workspace is linked right there. Feel free to check it out. Marcia and John, if you have anything to add, otherwise we'll take questions. Sorry if I spoke really fast.
It was perfect, Basha. Thank you. And from Bush Heritage perspective, I know it's been incredibly helpful to have the conservation standards as a supporting mechanism. The climate change impacts across our country in particular are going to be fairly devastating, and having the support of a large international organisation to help us through the steps of what we do about it has been really helpful. So thank you very much.
Well, we loved your case study and look forward to your further learning as you get further into the process of applying the technical information that you gathered to all of your sites all over Australia.
Yeah, thanks, Marcia, and good to see you again.
Yeah, nice to see you.
We are actually holding a small workshop, an introductory workshop with traditional owners in a specific area sometime soon, and so we'll be keen to report back on how that goes.
Great.
Any questions for Marcia or Basha?
Looks like there's one question. Will you have a learning session at the CCNet 2022 rally? Masha, John, why not?
I imagine so. I think, we definitely want to keep our learning group going. And so I think the rally would be a great opportunity to, continue the conversation and hear from more people who are applying different parts of climate smart conservation practice.
Agreed.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Maybe I could jump in. This is Caroline just jumping in, and Varsha mentioned this, but this was part of it was more funded, Moore and Walton Foundation both provided funding for collaborative learning work this year. And so this was one of the initiatives. We're going to hear from several in this showcase. But if you go over to the workspace, the link in here, and maybe Sarah can also drop it in our chat box. But there is, we're kind of in the process of just loading things up that have come in, but there's a whole lot of stuff coming in on the collaborative learning page. And so we'll have links to folders, and eventually we'll have it kind of cleaned up and make it more accessible. But I would encourage you to go there and check it out. And you'll see those case studies as well as other products from other initiatives.
Thanks, Caroline. Perfect. All right, if I can ask Felix to take up the mantle.
Hi all, thank you for having me. Yes, I am today speaking on behalf of the TAM team, the Teaching Adaptive Management team, which used to be let's say a working group within CCNet that was trying to focus on anything related to academic teaching of the standards. These days we have multiple courses all around the globe, which is great, and not in all of those we are involved in. So it's become sort of like this this movement, I want to say, which is great to see. So with regards to what the TAM team does, I'm just giving you an update on one of the or two courses that we're currently looking at in collaboration with the University of Wisconsin-Madison, called Conservation Essentials: Vital Skills for Analyzing and Adapting Conservation Projects. And so on the next slide, you see our team. This is currently the team, Marika, I think, who I've also seen on this call, and we are both independent. Then there's a whole bunch of people from the team or FOS, and then there is Nathan and a few others from the University of Wisconsin, which is great. So all of us are sort of like collaborating on this. On the next slide, well, this is sort of like the title slide. This is basically showing you the title slide of the previous course.
Sorry, I'm trying to turn
good.
off my video. That's why I'm like jumping around, but I guess maybe I shouldn't try to do that.
Totally fine.
There we go.
So this is the course on step 3 on the conservation standards, which we developed last year and which is currently up and running. And has received students. And then the second course that we are currently still working on is on step 4 of the conservation standards, purely focusing on that. So on this map, you see a few of the dots. You see a few of the students that have taken the step 3 course so far. And then on the next slide, you also get to see a few of the faces. We asked, if we could share their images and also give a few of the quotes. So a wide range of diversity within the students, which is great, really happy. We also give out a few scholarships on each cohort, so that enables people with lower income to also participate in the course, which is great. Yeah, and so far the feedback has been good. A few things to improve, which we are actually implementing in the course on step 4 that we're currently developing. So on the next slide, you see exactly that. So this is, yeah, this is all about step 4, analyze and adapt, and we're purely focusing on that. It's basically built in the same way the step 3 course has been built already. And if you've seen that, some of the videos that we use are also up on the YouTube channel that you can check out. And so step 4 course is basically built on the same principles, or with the same building blocks, let's say. If you need more information, there's the website, obviously, from the Nelson Institute of the University of Wisconsin. There is the playlist of all of the narrated module lectures up on our YouTube channel. And then there's also the complementary stories from the field, which are a set of videos where we interviewed specific people, a few of which are on this call actually, that we videoed and asked a few questions around certain topics related to step 3. And in the new course, this will be all around step 4 of the standards. And that sort of like accompany each module of the course, which is quite nice. And so yeah, this is the playlist. If you navigate to the YouTube channel of CCNet, I think it's CCNet or Conservation Standards.
Conservation Standards.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Caroline. Yeah, so it's on the Conservation Standards YouTube channel, and there's a playlist actually that has all of the modules, like the introductory, the case study, then the module 1, and then the according stories from the field. So if you watch it, you know, from top to bottom, you basically get the experience of, I'd say, a good chunk of the course. Of course, the course always includes discussion rounds and stuff like that. So it's a little bit less. But yeah, just so that you know where we are with this. If there are any questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you, Felix. That's always the toughest bit, isn't it? Step 4 and 5. It takes a long time in the conservation standards wheel to get around there, but it's the critical bit. So.
Absolutely, and we've been surprised by, let's say, the lack of knowledge even on step 3. So even step 3, there is, there's quite a demand out there, which is.
Absolutely, and I find there's a lot of people saying, yeah, we do adaptive management. Here's our plan. Like, yeah, that's the first bit.
One of the questions that may be within or floating around is around the next course starting. There's a course starting in January, the step 3 course, and we are hoping to launch, or we're very certain that we will launch the step 4 course next year. Can't really say when yet, so we don't want to make any promises, but towards the middle of the year, I think is doable. Let's see what happens. But we're working on it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Felix. Any questions? All quiet on the Western Front. I think just lots of positive feedback, Felix. So thank you so much for your presentation. That's really fantastic. Great to hear. I'm sure we'll be spreading the word. Thank you. And now over to David. David, I now understand what you're saying about your video. You look so much younger there.
So this whole presentation is about learning and adaptive management, the bit that seems to still be missing within conservation measures. And in, you know, good Lord, if George Clooney thinks that learning from failure is the way to move forward, who am I to say that that's not the way to move forward? Next. Basically, we're looking for a pathway to help people learn from failure. Next. We have a relationship with the strategic plan. Next. We have a vision. Next. we produced, what the whole idea was to try and get people to think about how do we learn from failure? And how can we do this in a way that helps us all do the last sections in that wonderful, wonderful circle of the conservation measures partnerships plan, learning and adaptive management, because that's the thing that's really been missing. So we've been trying to raise awareness about learning from failure, which is the big thing about adaptive management. And we've produced 2 documents around that, thanks to Walton Family Foundation and Moore Foundation, who funded this project. Next. So the big thing about this is for you guys is the take-home messages. 1, no one likes to talk about failure. Duh. Next. Funding agreements, oh my goodness, are grants. If you're not allowed to change your budgets by more than 10%, that's an impediment to learning from failure. What if something really just gets screwed up and you want to change your project? If you can't change your budget by more than 10%, that is an impediment from learning from failure and adaptive management. Wow, who knew that? Next. Reflection is a skill. All of us asking our own personal lives, why am I drinking too many beers during COVID? Well, I know why I'm drinking too many beers from COVID, because I'm at home and I'm bored. Reflection is a personal thing, and it takes skills and practice. Next. Pause and reflect sessions are marvelous for teams to learn internally. A team, if they talk to one another about what worked, what did not work, it's hugely empowering for the team to learn about how they can work better together. But it doesn't help an organization learn, because each team is a little silo within an organization. And so pause and reflect is brilliant, absolutely brilliant for team learning. It's not probably the best pathway for organizational learning. Next. If we don't have leaders who say, you guys need to spend time, even although it's a tiny amount of time, pausing and reflecting and learning from your successes and your failures, it's probably not going to happen in an organization. At least that's what we've learned from discussing this and interviewing big NGOs, donors, lots of folks about why pause and reflect might not work within an organization. So leaders need to lead by example. They need to admit failure. They need to understand that they need to guide their staff to believe that pause and reflect sessions are important for risk management. It's not a huge time commitment, and it improves outcomes. Next. It's really important to tell your teams why you're doing pause and reflect. And it's the simplest thing. It's about learning. It's not about pointing people's fingers at people who have failed. It's about learning. And it's learning that's really important, and pause and reflect is about learning. And leadership needs to guide teams to say that it's important for you to pause and reflect so you can learn. Next. The best way to learn pause and reflect is to do it on a scheduled system. Because if you pause and reflect when things are going well, your team coheres and they love one another and they like one another and they trust one another and they're willing to talk about stuff. And when the shit hits the fan, that team, if they've learned pause and reflect, which is a process, it's a learned process, it's a practice process. If you've practiced it, when things are going well and bad shit happens, oh my gosh, you have the social capital to deal with things that have gone badly. Next. So basically, I think pause and reflect is the most important way that we can round that circle of the conservation practice circle. I think it's the most important way for gathering evidence and adaptively managing. It's the single most important thing that we can possibly do. And what I'm planning to do in the next couple of months is produce a bunch of theatric sort of video plays, short 5-minute videos by students around a theatrical event about how you would actually do a pause and reflect session. And we're going to do it in English, Spanish, French, Bahasa, other languages, so people can actually understand how you might do pause and reflect sessions. Because frankly, I think if we don't do these, we will never do the final CMP circle. We will never do that. Thank you. Done.
Thanks, David. That was brilliant. And of course, I was too harsh earlier. George is just as beautiful and young as you are. So I was too hard on him before. And I think we've already got a couple of questions up there now. Have you seen a shift in people's perceptions around failure, and are they more willing to learn? David, are you able to answer that question for us? Have you seen a shift in people's perceptions around failure, and are they more willing to learn?
Yes, I mean, that's really interesting. I'm part of a 45 million euro project, European funded project, and FAO, CFOR, CIRAD, and WCS have all agreed to adopt pause and reflect, because they were all struggling. We were all struggling with how do we adaptively manage our projects at a time scale that matters to our projects. The whole evidence-based stuff, where you gather data and 4 years later you have an answer, is not at a time frame that helps you adapt your projects. But pause and reflect that happens every month, every 3 months, every 6 months, that allows you to change your projects on a real project management time frame. And CFOR, CIRAD, FAO, WCS project teams love it. They absolutely, and oh my goodness, even more, younger staff who never think that their voices are heard, and they get to say, David, this didn't work. Can we do something differently? And not only do they feel their voices are heard, but their voices are acted on. So pause and reflect is the most profoundly amazing adaptive management process.
Fantastic. Thanks, David. The next question. Oh, sorry. Are you?
I am going to do a little bit of a time check. We are a little bit over with the questions on this one. So I wonder if maybe we can have David get in here and respond to these, and maybe if we have time at the end.
So Caroline, can you give to me the link to the question so that I can actually ask the?
Yep. I will drop it into the chat box.
No, I think you did that. I think you did. I will shut up and answer the questions offline. Sorry. I always.
No. Well, it's clearly a topic that's got everybody very excited, David. So well done on that, and thank you for the great presentation. And sorry for the poor keeping.
Yeah, and we might have enough time to come back at the end too.
So Caroline, can I share my own screen?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to hand over to Nick, but I think he's. There's no handing over required.
Okay, I'm going to do. So you should be see my screen now. All right, so I'm going to talk about Marathi software, which is online and more awesome than ever. And we just click here. So this is where we fit in a big part of this part of the theory of change, as well as Camel up there. So Marathi is integral to what CMP is doing. And it helps, as most of you know, implement the conservation standard by doing 3 things. And I'm going to touch briefly on what most of you know, but some of the, especially the newer things that are coming up and where we're going to need your help testing and getting feedback on this work. So the first thing it helps you do is manage your individual projects. We've moved it online. So we've gone from a Dropbox model to a modern interface where you can edit stuff directly in place. Most of you are familiar with that. As part of that, we've had to give you a lot more control over who sees what, so people can play different roles and you can control whether your information is seen by the entire world or only by your project team or anywhere in between. And we're really proud to announce that we have full online diagramming with our modern look and feel interface. The full is a slight asterisk. There's a couple small features that are still coming, but now almost everything you can do in the old desktop, you can now do online, which we're pretty excited about. In particular, you can also, and this ties to the pause and reflect that David was just talking about, you can update your progress and results over time, show your lights so you can see how we're doing in both. Did we do what we said we were going to do, and are we achieving the results that we were hoping to have? And that's a really critical element of that pause and reflect part. You can update your indicators and your objectives, and you can get charts. So that's another fun thing about being online. We have these nice tree views now. There's basic spatial mapping where you can put points, lines, or polygons that represent your targets, your threats, your project area, things like that. It also speaks to ARC and Esri and other GIS programs. And we have this real cool ability. If you have multiple projects, you can, with a little help, create a report format that looks like that, run it against your Merathi data, and produce really nicely formatted reports that you can give to your stakeholders that have all your updated data. And what we are working on now are what we're calling easy on-ramp wizards. So this is a little bit of the example of what it might look like for objectives, where we can actually coach people to write better objectives, to develop good theories of change, and get used to using Merathi if they're scared by the diagrams and all that kind of stuff. So that's something where we're going to need some help and work from folks. Second thing that Merathi does is it helps combine projects into programs. So for example, Bush Heritage, they have all their different sites in their overall program. One of the things we're adding is this concept of strategy pathways. And a strategy pathway is basically at least one yellow thing linked to one blue or green thing, so a result. And the idea is that within a project, you might have a project 1 that's doing a bunch of different pathways, project 2 that's doing a bunch of pathways. We want to link the project to the program, but if the program is focused on salmon, they don't care about the wetland work. They only care about the salmon work that their projects that they're funding or working on are doing. So it really creates a more efficient structure to link the project level stuff at the child level to the parent level stuff. And then that could be a way to transmit funding, to think about results and objectives and adding or rolling those up, as well as learning. And so it allows a grant maker to select key pieces of a project and roll them up to the funding program pathway. It'll also create an architecture where we can maybe enter many projects in Merathi without having to create full Merathi project files. We're also building a API, so you can then take the information from Merathi and combine it into Power BI, and Net and company are doing all kinds of cool things with this, and this API supports that as well. Third thing we're doing is helping and learn from each other, and this relates to, in particular, thinking about evidence and integrating evidence with monitoring and evaluation. So we are about to pioneer and introduce a new feature in Merathi where you can now state on your situation analyses or on your theories of change, a high-level question: is rat eradication effective? You can actually break that into more specific assumptions or claims, so some of the details that are being here. And then we can take these different claims and these questions and put them into a chart. And then we can start to say, what is the current evidence for that question? We can rate how confident or not confident we are. You can go into a lot more detail if you pick this plus. And then where you can talk about the implications of what you know about your evidence. And then you can talk about your additional information needs. And these additional information needs become the basis for your ongoing monitoring, research, and learning plan. So we're excited about that. And of course, Merathi also supports CAMEL, which is a home for these generic lessons learned. So those are some of the new features in Merathi that you should try out. As part of the new Merathi release, we are also changing our business model. So it's going from a desktop where we sell seats. You had to have a license, a subscription to run Merathi. We run Merathi as a not-for-profit venture. We're not making money off it, but we do need to raise money to pay all our expensive engineers and to keep designing and improving the platform. So when we moved to online, we had to change our business model. We looked at a bunch of how different software systems work. And if you look at things like Replicon or Slack or Canvas or Asana, these are all used within an organization, and so they can charge you per seat. You add one more user to one more person to your office, you need to buy another seat license to use that particular software. We felt we were actually more like Zoom or Miro or Team Snap or Box, where it's really more for collaboration, and Merathi fits in this. In these cases, the owner wants to invite outsiders to play with the content, but doesn't want a license to be a barrier, and that's where Merathi fits in. So we're moving to a new funding model here. It will be free for anyone who wants to just view projects or interact with them. Kind of like the old desktop license, there will be a project license here or an individual license where you can view projects, you can do your own work online, but you can share with other people to view, but they can't edit it. Where we're really changing things is the team and program license, where now you can invite multiple people to collaborate on your project and work with you. You can either do that as an individual, but most people presumably do that more in a program setting where you can buy a different sized room, have a number of projects in that room, and then invite as many people as you want to come collaborate on that work. And again, we're not trying to be too rigid about this. These are sort of guidelines. If you have about 5 to 9 projects, then this is the price. We're also kind of increasing our low income pricing, making it more available to people. And come talk to us if you want to have a Marathi license that works for you. So that's a ton in a hurry about Marathi. Try it online. We also have the new Marathi challenge, which we pioneered at the CCNet rally. So you could give that a whirl as well. So that's a ton in a hurry about Marathi.
Fantastic, Nick, and thanks to you and the team for constantly improving on Marathi and making it easier and easier for us to work with. Any questions for Nick or the team?
It looks like there are a couple on slide 65. Nick, maybe you can
Might have
go
that hidden
there
for some reason.
if you have to escape so that it
Okay,
refreshes.
okay.
There you go.
So are there planned training videos online? Yes, we are hoping to build much better videos. Felix has been involved in that, and Carrie. It's a little tricky because things are moving so fast. It's hard to keep the videos up to date, but we are trying.
There is, Nick, sorry to interrupt, there is one set for Marathi Share online already on the diagramming part. So that is already up and running.
Great. And then there's a great question here about linking to Miro or Mural or some of these whiteboarding programs. So the basic problem is that those are sort of flat diagrams, right? You're just moving stickies around a sticky tarp, and Marathi is an underlying database. So it's really hard to express Marathi in a Miro thing. What we are exploring is allowing people to start in a workshop, just like you used to start on a sticky tarp, and then maybe have an auto transfer to bring the information into Marathi. But what you would not be able to do is then go back to Miro a second time. So we are kind of exploring ways to at least start. We also want to reach out to the Miro and Mural folks and see if we can maybe engage with them more. So it'd be good to know whether people favor Miro or Mural, or we need to work with both of those groups. And I can talk a lot more about that later if people want.
Perfect. Thanks, Nick. We might move on.
Okay, I get 2 more minutes because I'm doing a bonus presentation here. So you get 2 for the price of 1. So let me just go into this one real quickly here.
Perfect.
This is just a public service announcement. It's not a full presentation. It's about the standard classifications, which are the most geeky, boring, and yet essential CMP initiative. And it's really critical to the CMP plan as well. So you might remember that when we're talking about a threat reduction result, and that's the problem you're facing, if one group calls it cows, the next cattle, the next livestock, the next grazing, the next ranching, you don't all know you're dealing with the same problem, and therefore you don't know whether you're dealing with similar solutions. So about 15 years ago, we decided that both for the threat reduction results, the problems, and for the actions, we would work and create with IUCN. They had come up with a taxonomy of both threats and actions. CMP was working on the same thing. We spent a lot of time and created the unified global classifications, which were published and which have become the basis for a lot of conservation work. In 2013, CMP went out and redid them. The threats didn't change very much, but the actions changed a bunch. And we had a commitment to sort of renew these or refresh them every 5 to 7 years. Well, we're actually due for a new refresher. One of the problems that's evolved here is that although we had unified classifications, they're starting to split again. The red list have kind of never adopted 2.0 of CMP. CMP is going its own way. And that's not really a good thing. That's not the point of classifications. So we've reached out recently back to the IUCN folks, and we're actually hoping to stop that split. And we would like to use the opportunity of doing 3.0 to work with the red list folks and see if we can come up with a rationalized, harmonized version of the different classifications going forward. So if anyone's interested in that and wants to be in the most geeky and most boring initiative, see me, and we can be part of that work going forward.
Fantastic. Excellent job with your extra 2 minutes. Thanks, Nick. And so next we have change management with Charles, and I could be mispronouncing your name, Charles. I apologize for the very Anglo pronunciation, but if we can switch back to Caroline sharing, most likely.
Yeah, does that work, Charles, for you? Okay,
Yep.
Let me get that up. Jacqueline, could I also ask you, while I'm getting this up and running, to put that link to the classifications in the questions area, maybe even in the notes? Not the classifications, I'm sorry, the videos.
And Beck, just so you know, it's Charles Letra Mu Oyai Ule.
Very good. Thank you, David. I appreciate the coaching.
Am I sharing my screen now?
Nope.
Thanks, Caroline.
No, I'm not. Okay. I'm new to Zoom. Here we go.
Great. Thank you, Caroline. So yes, a quick overview of what we can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, of the products that we've been developing within this this project. Next slide. So we are currently developing guidance material and tools for key individuals that are aiming to provide conservation planning, improve conservation planning practices within their organizations through the adoption of the conservation standards. So within this group, we all want our organizations to be effective. We all believe in the value of the conservation standards to improve practices within our organizations. Anyone can play a key role in making this change happen, and we're trying to support those key individuals. But it can be hard to know where to start and to know how to progress along this journey. So we're developing tools and guidance for those people. So here we're using adoption as a generic term and more simple term to replace operationalization and institutionalization, because those are pretty hard to pronounce. But basically, we're talking about putting the conservation standards into use for specific projects and programs, and building of effective processes, consistent standards, infrastructure, and culture to support the conservation standards as the regular way of doing business within organizations. Next slide. So sorry for the multiple arrows, but this project is helping in a number of different ways make progress in the CMP strategic plan, but mostly we're trying to support successful pilot tests of the conservation standards and provide motivations, incentives, and good examples of organizational adoption of the conservation standards. Next slide. So a number of people have been helping out with this project over the last couple of months. So big thank you to everyone involved. Next slide. So this is our vision. Basically, what we're trying to do is to make organization-wide adoption of the conservation standards a manageable endeavor pretty much for anyone. Okay, next slide. So to date, we have reviewed business literature on change management. We have documented case studies, and we're integrating all of this guidance materials and tools into one single Marathi Share project so that everything's centralized in one place. Next slide. Okay, so now I'll give you a brief introduction of the guidance material and tools that we are developing. Next slide. Or next slide. So the tools and the guiding materials that we're developing are meant to support organizations that are anywhere in the process of adopting the conservation standards, and key individuals that have only received basic conservation standards training, as well as experienced coaches. So we developed those tools for organizations that are just starting the process of adopting the conservation standards, for organizations that are mature, having standardized their planning processes, adopted systems to document their plans, all the way to organizations that are consistently adapting their plans based on results and where processes are well integrated. So I'm sure you'll agree that this is no small task to support all of those organizations and all of those kinds of people. Next slide. So these are the tools that we have developed. So we're proposing that key individuals that are managing the adoption of the conservation standards within their organizations copy this Marathi Share project that we developed or the Word report created from the project and start populating it, adapting it to their own situation and use it to track their progress, learn, and adapt their approach to conservation standards adoption. So the first tool on the top left is a generic change management theory of change, which is meant to provide guidance that will be applicable no matter where you are in the process of adopting the conservation standards. So this is where we're applying classic literature, classic business literature on change management that can apply to any kind of project. On the right-hand side, you have the capability maturity model. So, and that's work that we have migrated to Marathi Share so that it's more user-friendly. And we're providing more specific guidance to improve specific practices from one level of maturity to another. Yes. And then this allows you to track your progress maturing for all of those practices. So at the bottom, we're also collecting a number of case studies, integrating all of them in a standard format into the Marathi Share project so that it's easier to learn from them. Next slide. So next steps, we are still integrating case studies, supporting material. We're going to send all of the material to the CCNet listserv so that we can get input. We're going to submit the how-to manual to the guidance review committee. We're going to share all of this to in a more detailed mini webinar in 2022. And you can get in touch with me or visit our workspace if you want to learn more. How's that for time? Should I do the next one faster? Or?
We have a little bit,
perfect.
yeah, maybe one question or so we could take. If there's any.
Does anyone have any questions for Charles? Charles is doing the next presentation as well. So I'll leave it up to you, Charles, if when you want to transition to the next one, and we can either do questions for both of them at the same time, or you can, if anyone has questions now, we can answer that right now.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we have questions, so why don't we just
move on?
Keep going. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, so this is a brand new topic that is still getting clarified. So we are looking into opportunities for collaboration between the Science Based Target Network and the Conservation Measures Partnership. Next slide, please. So if you know the Science Based Target Network, it's a very large initiative that operates under the Global Commons umbrella. It is being developed by a large coalition of more than 45 NGO partners. This is a snapshot of the members of the SBTN, and you see organizations in red, highlighted in red, that are also partners of the Conservation Measures Partnership or users of the conservation standards. Okay, so there's a big common group between those two organizations. Next slide. Yeah, so we're trying to see like what is the role of the CMP within this group. So what are those companies doing? So they're trying to answer this key question through guidance, methods, and tools that they're developing. So what can companies do today to start aligning with science, ensure that they're doing their part now for an equitable net zero nature positive future? So next slide. They are developing guidance that is similar to our standard conservation standards guidance that is translated in many different languages. So right now we're at version 4.0. So they're at their first version that they have just released in September 2020. Which gives a high-level overview of the approach that they're suggesting companies adopt when they're trying to set targets for nature protection. So it describes the steps that are needed to set science-based targets. Right now, they're still filling in some gaps. They're in consultation with all the different groups to make sure that they're not reinventing the wheel and that they're aligning with all the different methods and tools that are out there doing similar things like the conservation standards. The final version of the guidance and the tools is scheduled for January 2022. So the timing is great for all of those people to start discussing and making sure that we are aligning our practices. Next slide. So first is going to be a matter of aligning language. So they're using science-based targets in slightly different ways that the conservation standards community is used to. So for them, science-based means align with the Earth's limit and society's sustainability goals. In the conservation standards world, it would mean something more like evidence-based. For targets, they really mean measurable, actionable, time-bound objectives. So the equivalent term in the conservation standards would be objectives for targets. There's been discussions, I don't know if you remember at the last CMP retreat, about whether we should change the use of the word target within the conservation standards. So that is one example of a group that is using the word target in a different meaning, different way than what we're using. Next slide. So right now, the network is working with a number of companies and consultants to test their methods and tools. This is a great opportunity, I think, for the conservation standards community to expose the great work that they are doing to a wide range of collaborators, and I think it's a good opportunity to expose those organizations that are not aware of what the conservation standards can do for them. Next slide. So the science-based target networks method and the conservation standards are both science or evidence-based adaptive management cycles. So there's good alignment between the two methods, but there are also major differences because the target audience is not the same. So one is more for NGOs and governments, and the other is really for businesses. But if we could work together to minimize those differences, then it could allow us to build off of each other's work and send a single unified message to organizations that either the science-based targets or the conservation standards are the way to go to plan how you're going to create a better future. Next slide. So that's just an example of what we're working on, trying to bridge the gap between what these guys are working, what we are doing. So they're working mostly on the IPBES framework, but as you can see, it's pretty easy to make the jump between their framework and the conservation standards framework with threats, biodiversity targets, and human well-being targets. Next slide. So they're working to align with global agendas, and we're trying to learn from what they're doing, and especially trying to see what kind of bridges or how can we learn in the scope of the learning initiative on global agendas. Next slide. They are also working on setting common targets, common indicators, so that all companies track their progress towards the same indicators and the same objectives. So I think it's a great, again, there's a great opportunity for us to learn from these people. How do you standardize indicators? How do you prescribe how much is enough so that organizations set ambitious goals? Next slide.
I think that linked me out to, let's see, there we go.
Great, thank you. So one of the gaps that they have identified is in their last steps, which is measure, set, disclose, act, and track. They're saying that those steps of theirs are not currently well supported by existing tools, and which is luckily the strength of the conservation standards and Meraki is really to support, measure, track your actions, track the results, and track the impacts that you are generating. So they're right now they're looking for what they call a master tool, and this is the list of requirements that they have identified. And all of the green checkbox, in my view, are requirements that are met by Meraki and Meraki Share. There's only the bottom one, Variety Share was not really built for companies, but everything else I think is a really good fit for what they're looking for. And right now they don't know that Variety exists.
Hey, Charles, I'm going to jump in here with the time check.
Okay.
We're a bit over.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Just want to let you know.
So next slide, and I'm done. Those are the next steps. So if you want to get involved, same email as last topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charles. I think this is a really worthwhile initiative, and take your point too on assimilating the language, making sure that we're all talking the same language, I think can be really helpful. Unfortunately, we don't have time for you to answer questions in the session, so I'll just ask you to do that. But we have got a few questions in the chat and there's lots of interest, so please do that out of session, just so we can make room for the last talk, which is Caroline.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so maybe Charles, if you can just answer those, if we can get those questions into the presentation and answer them there, that way we have a history of the discussion. So thank you, everybody. For the last one, I'm going to talk a little bit about an initiative that has taken root, I guess, a little more concretely in the last few months, lighter conservation standards approaches. It's actually something a lot of us have been talking about for a long time, thinking about how we can get materials into the hands of coaches, team leaders, those who are interested in the conservation standards in a way that's accessible so that they can get involved with the conservation standards, take a lighter approach, and then hopefully dig in deeper as they go along. So this is our team. We've got some individuals working on content development, but really we see this kind of as the team involves you all, the conservation standards community. We've been reaching out quite a bit to get your input and feedback and reactions, and that's been super helpful. This feeds into the CMP strategic plan, the goal 1, concretely in the develop new guidance and tools, but also in training materials. And it feeds into and supports a lot of other strategies that we see here. A quick review of our timeline. This initiative really got going in August, and we spent a couple of months on a scoping phase where we reached out to you all, got some ideas about what you had been doing, what the needs were, what your interests were, and then we focused on product development over the last couple of months. And we see this, that should actually say January 2022, but we see this going, hopefully continuing on beyond the initial progress that we've made. And what we have produced, we will get into the hands of the Guidance Review Committee. We'll be sharing it with the community, getting it into your hands as well. So just a quick review of some of the consultations we've done with the community. We had in September a survey that went out to people to get a sense of what the needs were, where lighter approaches made sense, where they didn't, any examples and resources you all might have had. We used that to compile, we took the resources and compiled a list of those. We also reached out one-on-one with a few people, in particular Phyllis at WWF was really helpful because she spent a lot of time thinking about how to operationalize the WWF's version of the conservation standards, make it accessible to WWF staff people. We also did at the end of September a couple consultation sessions. These were basically the same thing, but covering different time zones to be more accessible to everybody. And here we just started to get more, dive a little bit deeper into getting thoughts on what products would be most useful, and also thinking about what tips and shortcuts and lighter approaches that you all have used that we could try to build into final products. We did a session at the CCNet rally where we had some initial drafts of kind of first takes on products and got input feedback from you all. And we're even able to, because we did 2 sessions, kind of do a little bit of adapting based on what we heard in the first session and turn that around into the second one. So that was super, super useful. You can notice here, we actually maybe in the next one, we ended up taking a kind of recipe cookbook approach to the final product. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But one of the final products is, these are the three main things, at least that we have produced thus far. The first one is a scenario chart where we've taken some basic scenarios that we as coaches or teams have found are quite common, and then thought about what are the bare essentials that really need to happen in order to move through that scenario. And then thought about, what you should do, what you maybe potentially should do. And we use these as the backbone for what we are calling a lighter conservation standards cookbook. The idea that doing the conservation standards is kind of, you basically, you can have different scenarios that are like dishes and certain things, certain ingredients that you might need in those, for those dishes to come together, but recognizing that even, or the best cooks kind of mix and match things depending on what they've got in their cupboards and refrigerators and such. And so, but just kind of providing some guidance, some thoughts to what, if you are working in this different scenario, what are some of the things that you should consider doing. And then these ingredients or these elements link to different tip sheets where we then start to go into detail, like if you need to be working on theories of change, what are some lighter approaches to doing theories of change. So those are the two main products. We also have some community suggested resources. What's next? We intend to continue gathering community input on these draft products and adapting and refining them. We would like to, we're hoping that we can get additional support, and we thank CMP and the Moore Foundation for the support that we have had thus far. We'd like to finish up the tip sheets. We made some solid progress on them, but have more to do on others. We'd like to also think about different ways of sharing material. Right now, everything's in a Google slide deck and hyperlinked about, but we recognize that there are probably more effective ways of communicating and sharing the materials and updating them over time. And then each tip sheet has a bunch of resources, or we've started to identify resources, examples of how to take lighter approaches. And that's something we'd like to build out over time too. So how you can get involved, you can give us your input, participate in these sessions. They've been hugely valuable. Test the cookbook. Maybe there are other scenarios and ingredients that we should consider. Visit our workspace, but not right now because it's under construction, and contact me. And I did not do a good job of sticking to my time. We're at the time.
Yeah, you're 1 minute over, Caroline.
So maybe any questions, please just add them to the right here, and we will get back to you.